Hidden inside every single research paper, every technical report, there's this entire world of data just waiting to be explored. But, well, most of the time, it's completely locked away. Today, we're going to look at two really groundbreaking AI inventions that basically act like a master key, turning plain old text into powerful, usable datasets.
Seriously, think about it. You've been there, right? You're reading about some incredible medical breakthrough, and suddenly you get this flash of insight. You want to test a new hypothesis, or maybe just see the results in a totally different way, but you hit a brick wall. The actual data, it's nowhere to be found.
And that, right there, is the heart of the problem. The original datasets for most of these published studies are just unavailable. They might be too sensitive, way too expensive, or honestly just too complicated to share. So all that potential for new discoveries just sits there, locked up.
So yeah, let's just call it what it is. It's a data lockbox. We can get a peek at the treasure inside through the charts and the summary stats in the paper, but we can't actually get our hands on the real thing. So what are the actual locks on that box? Well, this slide breaks it down pretty clearly. You've got huge privacy concerns, especially with stuff like patient records. Then there are proprietary restrictions. A company owns the data and won't let it go. Sometimes it's just the massive cost and headache of sharing a gigantic dataset. And a lot of the time, for whatever reason, it's just not shared. Period.
But what if you didn't have to pick the lock at all? What if you could just create a whole new key? This is exactly where our first invention comes into play, the synthetic data key.
Okay, picture this. You're on a publisher's website looking at a paper. Right next to that download PDF button we all know, there's a new icon. The patent actually calls it an interactive element, and it's promising you access to a synthetic dataset that's inspired by that very publication. You just click it, and you're in.
So what happens when you click that little button? Well, this diagram from the patent filing shows the magic behind the curtain. The system basically vacuums up the content, the text, the tables, the figures, all of it. It uses AI to figure out what all the variables and statistics mean in context, which is a fancy way of saying it understands the paper. Then it generates a totally new dataset from scratch, and, here's the kicker, without ever seeing the original private data.
And here's what pops out on the other side. A clean, beautiful, tabular dataset. The columns are all named correctly, the values look totally plausible, and the data's distribution mimics what was described in the paper. It feels like the real data, but it's a completely new, totally safe-to-use creation.
So let's be super clear on what this is. This is synthetic data. It is not the original data. It's not even trying to reconstruct it. Nope. It's an entirely artificial creation that's been designed to share the same statistical DNA, the same patterns, the same relationships, the same properties as the real thing, but it's built using only the clues left behind in the document.
Now this first invention, it's an absolute game changer. But, it also opens up this whole other much deeper set of questions. How do we make this data not just look real, but act real enough for serious, hardcore scientific work?
And that's the big question, isn't it? If you're a data scientist or a researcher, just having something that looks plausible isn't going to cut it. You need to be able to trust that the data behaves in a way that is statistically faithful to the original study. Is a simple mimic really good enough to build and test new models on? This brings us to a whole new level of challenges, and this is what the second invention we're talking about really tackles. We're not just generating numbers anymore. We're talking about preserving precise statistics, maintaining those tricky correlations between variables, and even handling a messy mix of inputs like PDFs and Excel sheets. And whatever comes out the other end has to be logical and, super importantly, reproducible.
To solve these much harder problems, you need more than just a simple key. You need a full-blown AI data engine. And that's what this second, more advanced patent describes, a system built for industrial-strength, truly believable synthetic data.
And the workflow here is just so much more robust. It starts by taking in multiple sources, not just the PDF, but maybe supplementary Excel files or other notes. It pulls out very specific statistics, and crucially, it works hard to preserve the relationships between different variables. It also runs advanced quality checks to make sure everything makes sense. And then, as this final brilliant touch, it spits out not just the data, but the code you need to reproduce it.
This slide really shows you the incredible leap forward. The simple key was amazing. It gave us plausible data from a single text source. But the AI data engine? This thing generates statistically robust, reproducible data from a whole mix of complex sources. It's really the difference between a rough sketch and a detailed engineering blueprint. And here's a perfect example of that blueprint in action. This is taken right from the sample source code in the patent. To make the data for a liver disease study believable, the engine doesn't just guess. It knows the mean for total bilirubin has to be 2.5 with a standard deviation of 4.3. It captures this statistical DNA for dozens of variables, making sure the final dataset isn't just plausible, it's deeply realistic.
So what does the result from this engine look like? It's breathtaking, honestly. This is just a snapshot of a synthetic dataset that was generated from the documents of a single study called MELD+. Look at that. It's got over 50 different variables, demographics, lab results, medications, everything. And every single bit of it was created by an AI just reading the study's documents.
But hold on, because this is the part that gets truly mind-blowing. The original MELD Plus study, it was based on about 5,000 patient admissions. That's a pretty good number. But the AI engine, it took that description and generated a dataset with over 150,000 synthetic admissions. It didn't just unlock the data, it amplified it on a massive scale, creating this huge, safe sandbox for researchers to go and play.
So this isn't just some clever technical trick. The ability to turn any document into a rich, scalable dataset, that fundamentally changes what is even possible.
I mean, a whole new world of possibilities just cracks wide open. You can train students on data that feels completely real without a single privacy risk. Any researcher, anywhere in the world, can test a wild new idea on a dataset inspired by a landmark study. Companies can build better, safer AI models without ever touching sensitive customer info. It just accelerates the whole pace of science by making knowledge interactive.
And in the end, it all comes down to this really powerful summary from the first patent's abstract. This isn't just for one type of article. It enables access across a huge range of content, essentially turning our global library of documents into this global wellspring of interactive data.
Which kind of leaves us with this one last fascinating question to think about. For centuries, we've been writing down what we know in documents. Now, we have a way to turn all that static knowledge into dynamic, explorable data. So if any text can become a dataset, what completely new insights are just waiting for us to unlock?